This is Terry Cavanagh. He may look happy now, but life wasn't always so easy. It all started way back in 2007. Terry loved making games so much so, he quit his day job to do it full time. But the indie gaming scene wasn't anything like it is now, and he had a rocky start financially. He made games in C++ and Allegro, and also made games using Flash. You can't really make money on Flash games nowadays, but at the time, there was a business model that some developers made work. Basically, you would churn out monthly games, then sell a license to host those games to various sites, who would then make money off ads. At one point in 2009, Terry made a cool $1,500 from licensing his game, Don't Look Back. But to really make this business model work, Terry needed to be able to sell his games monthly, and that wasn't happening.
Irish money?
And although he created a bit of a name for himself with these games, by 2010, things were looking dire. After using up all of his savings and the last of his money from a bank loan, Terry was at a crossroads. Give up game design and return to the cubicle, or throw one last Hail Mary and hit it big. And with VVVVVV, he did just that. The worst thing about VVVVVV, much like the artist formerly known as Prince, is the name. Are you really meant to say each V? Are you supposed to say V6? Actually, you know what? I've got Terry right here. He can tell us. Terry, how's it going?
Hey Tim, welcome to the DSS Soli.
Oh, is that the name of the ship?
Yeah, a little Easter egg. That's Magnus's musician handle.
Oh, hi.
He asked if I could name the ship after him. I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
Well, Terry, I've got to know, how do you say the name of your game?
I just say V.
Okay.
When people ask me this question by text, I always say, oh, it's pronounced VVVVVV. And I love that joke. I love the ambiguity of it, but I can't do that when you're actually recording me talk. So sure. I just say V. Sometimes I say VVVVV just for fun, to throw people off.
Alright, well, anyway, the fact that this game took off despite the unconventional, hard-to-pronounce name is, in my opinion, a testament to how great the word of mouth was for the actual gameplay. The main gimmick of the game, where you flip gravity instead of jump, hadn't really been seen before. There were one or two games that had it. An older game called Terminus had a character that could flip, and personally, I remember doing a bit of flipping in a Mega Man 5 stage, but this was the first game to really flesh out the idea and include concepts like characters wrapping around the screen and rubber bands like these that forced you to flip. Once your friend group got a hold of this game, beating it almost felt like a rite of passage. The game was hard. And I'm not talking about Dark Souls style difficulty where players are punished for being impatient or thoughtless. This game was hard because the movement was so extreme and alien. First off, the game's gravity gimmick was extremely uncommon, so people weren't ready for it. Second, there were no mid-air movement correcting abilities. Very common these days to have a mid-air jump, or twist, or dash, especially in 3D platformers, but here, you get nothing. Third, the movement sensitivity is completely insane. There are two speeds in V: tiptoe tapping an inch at a time, or balls to the wall top speed. Other popular platformers had a gradual ramp up to top speed, so this was particularly difficult to get used to. This instant max speed applied to mid-air movement too, making micro adjustments between walls of spikes that much more difficult. Lastly, the player falls extremely fast, so even if you've become comfortable with aerial strafing, you still need to have good reflexes. This rigid, hypersensitive movement isn't everyone's cup of tea. I'd include myself in that group. And yet, something about the simplicity of the movement draws me to the game, taunting me. It says, really? You can't even beat this? And yes, I can beat it. Can't I? I can. I can. And before I know it, I've been playing for 3 hours. There really is something quite addictive about it. The short time between checkpoints makes progress feel constant and always within reach. The game's philosophy of very hard, but unlimited lives and lots of checkpoints is the heart of V's success. I love this system so much because it maximizes the amount of time you're doing what you paid for, which is playing the game. At the time, console games from the big developers were still following the old extra lives system, which was a holdover from arcade games. Well, these indie devs were way ahead of the curve. With fresh eyes on game development, they threw out the old rules and experimented, trying to find the best systems for their vision. They realized you don't really need lives. Game overs just grind momentum to a halt, and it's not like there's a slot for inserting coins into your PC.
I actually think the credit to this goes to Maddie Thorson, who eventually made Celeste. Her early games, Jumper in Game Maker, are, as far as I'm aware, the first ones to have this gameplay loop. And I'm pretty sure, I would have been playing a lot of these Game Maker games in 2009, and I would have already been there in terms of design sensibility.
And V is one of those games, alongside other hits like Meat Boy and I Want to Be the Guy, that really brought this no lives, many checkpoints system into the mainstream and showed that it could be successful and, most importantly, fun. Although this system makes for a game that rarely wastes the player's time, there is one aspect of the game I feel could be tighter, and that's the teleporter grid. The map offers tons of teleporter locations, but only a few are actually useful. You'll pretty much be using the teleporter for two reasons: to explore parts of the map you haven't been to yet, or to grab trinkets you missed. For the first use, the teleporter on the ship is such a central point on the map that you pretty much start exploration from there every time anyway. As for trinket cleanup, most of the teleporters are not just useless, they are deceptively useless. This trinket you encounter fairly early on is infamous for being one of the hardest in the game. So most people will likely give up and return to it after they've had more practice in the other levels. Unfortunately, this trinket is deep in the middle of a level and has no nearby teleporters. There is a teleporter one screen away on the map, but it's completely disconnected from this level, almost as if to troll people who are trying to get there faster. This trinket is even worse. It's worth pointing out, first of all, that the trinket itself is actually my favorite in the game. You have to start at this checkpoint, then make a loop around the area without touching a single checkpoint along the way. Then you intentionally die and respawn at the original checkpoint, with a path now being available. It's a great subversion of the checkpoint system, turning these bastions of safety into run-ending hazards. Because this trinket is more of a puzzle than a straight platforming challenge, it's very likely you'll miss it your first time through. Unfortunately, once again, you have to replay the whole level, and once again, there's a teleporter right next to the trinket, but if you try to go back and get the trinket this way, you'll be met with a blanket of spikes. In fact, every end-of-level teleporter is useless. If you try to use one, you'll be unable to progress backward. If that's a level design decision, that's fine. But in that case, these teleporters should be one way and removed from the map. If you removed those 4, plus 2 of these 3, which are only a few screens away from each other, it would make the map a lot less cluttered and eliminate the chance of teleporting somewhere that leads to spikes and nothing else. All in all, though, this teleporter thing is a nitpick. The vast majority of the game is delightful, with tons to do after you're done. There's also a level editor, which is surprisingly robust, almost intimidating. The game comes with a couple levels made from guest designers as well, and they really showcase how powerful these tools are. I found the one where your character is some type of infected alien to be particularly funny. And then there's other levels that push the base game's mechanics further than anything I could come up with. Then there's the visuals. Despite having such a simple graphical style, the game's characters can be quite endearing.
They're basically hyper-intelligent alien children. They say comically silly things to each other like, "I'm helping," but they also will say something very scientific and complicated. Putting those things together was quite funny to me.
I'm a particular fan of the enemy designs, which bring a surprising amount of life to Dimension V. It feels like some sort of world between worlds, where 4-dimensional objects pass in and out of existence, thoughts manifest physically, and space wraps around itself.
I am so high.
Even though a lot of it seems random, there is a weird cohesion to it that works, and feels very unique to this game.
I actually kept a dream journal while I was working on V. Some of the enemies came directly from that. I think like the stop sign enemies and the yes men enemies and the elephant, which I think is a particular highlight. But a lot of the enemies as well are just kind of like, the Commodore 64 inspired abstract enemies and things like Monty on the Run, games like that, which had a big influence on V.
Probably the most memorable aspect of this game for many people is its incredible, heart-pumping music. Is there anything that you would go back and change?
I don't think I would change anything.